Okay, next we remove the blanking plug from the clutch port off the Clake and install the clutch line. Okay, next we remove the clutch reservoir lid, which is the lid closest to the rider. We're using a 2.5mm Allen key. And you need to place this somewhere clean. Okay, on this particular bike, it's fitted with a cable clutch standard. And Clakes require hydraulic operations, so we have to use a Magura slave system to replace the standard cable system. With this, it runs mineral oil in it, and some other models of bikes, such as earlier KTMs, also run mineral oil in their clutches. And it's very important not to cross-contaminate the brake fluid with the clutch fluid. So we only remove one reservoir lid at a time and make sure we fully bleed one system at a time before moving on to the next system. We also must be very careful to wipe up any spilt fluids. Okay, next we fill the clutch reservoir with mineral oil. With the clutch reservoir full of mineral oil, we now bleed the clutch line. To do this, we keep the line higher than the reservoir itself, and what we do is we pull the lever to the bars, then close over the fitting using our fingers over the banjo, then pull the lever back. We then take our fingers off, pull it to the bars, close it over again. And you just repeat this until all the air is out of the line and fluid starts to come through. Now all the line is purged of air. What we do is we leave the lever in the inward position, okay, and then I'm going to hang this higher than the reservoir up here, ready to mount the clutch slave cylinder. Okay, the next stage is we fill the Magura slave with mineral oil. To do this we use a small syringe, and we just carefully syringe in the fluid and make sure we've got no airlocks inside. When you're filling the slave cylinder, it also pays to occasionally give it a tap just to make sure you haven't got any trapped air in it. Place the clutch cylinder roughly where it's supposed to go and mark where the line, the angle that the line's got to go on, so that it fits nicely. Okay, if you place one sealing washer on the banjo bolt, place it through the banjo fitting, then place the other sealing washer on and install the fitting. Just loosely tighten that by hand, and if you can just double check the angle of the line. Okay. Okay, then firmly holding the body of the slave cylinder, just tighten the fitting. Be very careful not to over tighten this fitting. Okay. Next, very carefully pull the rod out until you see the fluid air just coming out, until there's solid fluid there, and then carefully tighten the bleed screw. It's very important when you're handling the Magura slave cylinder not to bend the rod. So whenever you're holding it to tighten something, hold it by the body itself. Okay, with Magura slave cylinders you must be very careful not to push the rod in. They're designed so that it needs to have pressure on it before it'll come in. So if you can only pull these rods outward. Now that the Magura slave is bled, we simply place the rubber protective cap on. Now that the slave cylinder is bled, we simply route the line on the same path that the original clutch cable went. On this bike we've actually removed the radiator bolts so that we can just pull the radiator out slightly to allow us to run the line. On this particular model it's easier to remove the bracket itself to allow us to hook the spoke in to the arm, and then we simply pull that back and install the bolt. With the slave cylinder installed, you should be able to pull it back, and the play there should be between 4 and 6 millimeters. Okay, if you note now that clutch lever isn't returning properly. This is because there's still air in the clutch system somewhere. So what we need to do is work it backwards and forwards until the air comes out. It's best to do with this with the handlebars so that the left hand side of the handlebar is slightly lower than the right hand side of the handlebar. This allows the air to be worked out through the port. Sometimes, to help it work its way out, it's best to actually fold the lever outwards, like so, and then work the lever in just a little bit, in and out. Also, you can, if you've still got troubles, you can pull back on the slave cylinder, which forces the fluid up. And see there? We had some air come out there. We repeat that a few times. Okay, we'll now fold the lever back in and see how it feels. Okay, there's still a bit of air coming out. It's actually best when doing this to pull the lever in slowly and pull it out fast. So I put my finger behind the lever so that I can flick it outwards. And you leave it for a few seconds in between. So in slowly, let it rest for a second, then out quickly. Now the lever's starting to feel better, but I still think there's just a little bit more air in it, so we'll keep trying. We'll fold the lever out again. Okay, and we'll pull back on the slave. Fold it back in. Okay, I still think there's a little bit of air in the system, it's just not returning quite smoothly. So what we'll do is we'll fold out the lever and remove the clutch breathe screw, which is the screw that's in line with the reservoir and closest to the rider when he's sitting on the bike. This requires a 3mm Allen key. Okay, now we can see the fluid and it should just slowly rise up, and it might bring with it some air. Okay, there was just a tiny bubble underneath the screw. Once the fluid has risen to the top, we'll replace the bleed screw. One way of telling when all the air's out of the system is that as soon as you move the lever, even the slightest amount, you'll see the rod is also moving too. Okay, we return the bars so that the reservoir is in a parallel position, and we fill the reservoir to approximately 4 millimeters from the top. Then we replace the lid with the diaphragm in position, and you'll note that there's a tag on the end of the lid, and this should coincide with a cutaway here. This ensures that the right lid has gone in the right position. But to double check, we know this is mineral oil, so it says mineral oil there, and underneath it says mineral oil. Okay, and it pays to have a rag handy, because done correctly the fluid will just slightly overflow there, and you need to wipe that up straight away. Okay, now we tighten these screws firmly, but not so much so that it distorts the cap.